You're putting me on the spot here, aren't you? That's what you'd have in about, what, 60 grams of carbon or something like that. So if I was to guess, I'd say something like that. Million.
Well, and you see someone like the people that run SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and they're always like asking for funding. And they're like, we need more funding. We have to figure this out. And one day, what if we shut down and then the signal comes?
Well, it's interesting though, that if you ask astronomers, so you say, what's the probability of other civilizations being out there? Then they will point, for example, to the new data from the Kepler Space Telescope, which tells us that there are probably around 20 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way galaxy, in the sense that they're small rocky planets in what's called the habitable zone around stars.
The Goldilocks.
Around main sequence stars like the Earth. So 20 billion, so maybe 1 in 10 stars in the sky has an Earth-like planet around it, potentially. So that's a lot. So you think 20 billion? So the question then becomes, well, how likely is it for simple life, if it arises, to make its way into a civilization? And that's where the biologists come and kind of calm the astronomers down and say, well, you might think there are lots of places for life, we would agree. But on Earth, it took 3.8 billion years to go from the origin of life to a civilization, which is about a third of the age of the universe, give or take. So you had to have an unbroken, stable line of life that evolves in the right way, as it were. First of all, it gets complex. I mean, there's a thing called the Cambrian explosion in the history of life on Earth, which was about 550 million years ago or so, which sounds like a long time. But for 3 billion years before that, there was nothing that we would call complex. Single-celled organisms doing some clever stuff like photosynthesis, but not much. And then suddenly you get a big jump in the oxygen content of the atmosphere on Earth, which was to do with photosynthesis and some geology in play with it. That's how the oxygen gets into the atmosphere. And then you get a big jump and you get complex life emerging. And then pretty quickly, 500 million years or so, you go from complex things to a civilization. But even then, you think about Homo sapiens we mentioned earlier, they only arose 200,000 years ago. So for the vast majority of the history of life on Earth, there's been nothing that could do anything clever in the sense of thinking and building spacecraft and radio telescopes. So there's a legitimate debate about whether the undoubted increase in... We know now that there are homes for life out there in the Milky Way. They're very common. We know that. But what we don't know is the probability that life will emerge in the first place, and secondly, the probability that will turn into a civilization.